Hey guys, Wagner here. If you're watching this, you're either really bored or you are going to be on a sled at some point. Now this is mostly in preparation if you're actually doing a sled course, because there's some online materials that go along with this. But again, if I can't meet with everybody individually for, whatever sort of COVID reasons, then at least this exists. So I've put together a couple things on some sled mechanics, some resources I found useful. I mean, if you want to know how these things work, then this is a good place to start. And a bit of a high-level overview of our machines too. So, yeah, here you go.
Oh, she'll fire up, just need some gas down the cylinders. Just gotta dump a little gas down the old cylinders, Those are torqued and
So first things first, snowmobiles. What's a snowmobile? How does it work? And what are the different parts of it? Hopefully this video is going to answer some of those questions.
Snowmobile driveline consists of four principal components: the engine, a continuously variable transmission, a secondary chain drive system, and the track and suspension. A snowmobile's rear suspension must be included in any discussion of the powertrain, as it plays a vital role in assisting the track in delivering power to the ground. In a snowmobile, torque is transmitted from the engine to the CVT's primary clutch, through the drive belt to the CVT's secondary clutch. The secondary clutch is attached to and also drives a countershaft. The countershaft drives the secondary chain drive system's drive sprocket, which transmits power through a chain to the chain drive's driven sprocket. The driven sprocket transmits power to the track drive axle shaft. From the axle shaft, power is transmitted to the track drive sprockets and to the track itself. Engine torque is then conveyed along the track to the suspension, close to the rear axle, to produce forward traction. It is important to recognize that a snowmobile suspension system is not merely a means of providing good ride characteristics. It's also an essential part of the drivetrain. Without a carefully designed and adequately adjusted suspension system, much of the power produced by the engine would never reach the ground.
So are you familiar with two-stroke versus four-stroke? Well, the snowmobiles that we have are two-stroke sleds. And if you're wondering about that, here's a video done by Donut Media on the differences between two-stroke and four-stroke engines in this.
So there's two main types of gasoline-powered combustion engines: the two-cycle or two-stroke and the four-cycle or four-stroke engines. The names pretty much explain how they operate. A two-cycle engine completes a combustion and exhaust cycle in only 2 strokes of the piston, and a four-cycle takes 4 strokes of the piston. Let's start with a four-stroke engine, because we talk about it a lot when we're talking about cars. The piston moves down and the intake valve opens to let in a mixture of air and fuel. That's the intake stroke. When the piston moves back up, it compresses the air-fuel mixture, and that's the compression stroke. So when the spark plug releases a spark, the resulting explosion pushes the piston back down, the combustion stroke. When the piston gets to the bottom of the stroke, the exhaust valve then opens, and when the piston moves up, it pushes the exhaust from the cylinder out through the tailpipe. And that is the exhaust stroke. It's not difficult to see where we get these names, and the whole cycle in a one-cylinder four-stroke engine is powered by the first combustion stroke. Now, On to the two-strokes. While it sounds more basic, the two-stroke engine was patented after the four-stroke. Carl Benz received a patent for his two-stroke gas engine in 1879 in Germany. He saw 3 of the 4 strokes in an autocycle engine as wasted, and he wanted to fix that. A two-cycle engine has much simpler mechanics. It consolidates the process of a 4-stroke engine into 2 strokes. But how? The piston's really doing a bunch of different things in a 2-stroke engine, so it's a little hard to split up. It's drawing air and fuel into the crankcase while it's pressurizing air and fuel in the chamber, and it's forcing up air and fuel to the chamber when it's being driven down by combustion. On one side of the piston is the combustion chamber, where the piston's compressing the air-fuel mixture and capturing energy released by the ignition of the fuel. On the other side of the piston is the crankcase. The crankcase also acts as an air chamber or reservoir. As the piston drives up on its combustion stroke, it's creating a vacuum to suck in air and fuel from the carburetor through the reed valve. The valve doesn't need to be mechanically actuated because of the airflow. Once the combustion stroke starts, that pressurizes the crankcase, the valve closes, and the air and fuel is forced into the combustion chamber. Meanwhile, it's the sides of the piston that are doing the job of the valves in an autocycle engine, covering and uncovering the intake to the chamber and the exhaust port out of it. The air and the fuel rushing up force out the exhaust, which has a scavenging effect, pulling more air and fuel into the chamber until the piston once again closes things off. Then the air and fuel are compressed and ignited, and the whole thing starts over again. So that one power stroke doesn't have to carry it as far as it does in a 4-stroke. That's why you're going to more often see a 4-stroke engine with multiple cylinders. So you can get more consistent power with fewer cylinders from a 2-stroke, even if it's only one, a 1-cylinder engine. So you may not be making more power per power stroke with a 2-stroke, but you're making twice as many power strokes as in a 4-stroke engine. And 2-stroke engines can work in any orientation, which can be important in something like a chainsaw. 2-strokes are lighter, simpler, and less expensive to manufacture, and also have pretty fantastic power to weight ratio compared to many 4-stroke engine designs. They also have fewer overheating concerns. 3 of the 4 strokes of a 4-stroke engine involve hot stuff. Compression heats up, combustion is super hot, and the exhaust, well, that's just pushing out hot air. In a 2-stroke, each new charge is cooling off the chamber, and often the top of the cylinder is exposed to air for cooling. That's why they got all those dang all metal ridges to dissipate the heat into the air. But if 2-strokes are so great, why don't you normally see them engines in cars? Well, they have some pretty significant disadvantages. In a 4-stroke engines, valves allow the separation of the combustion chamber and the drive shaft. This lets oil lubricate the sides of the piston and everything under it without intruding into the combustion chamber. In a 2-stroke, remember you got no valves, so oil's gotta mix with the gas before it gets to the cylinder. The oil and the gas together are going to do the lubrication. Gas and oil together lubricate worse than oil alone, and gas and oil together combust worse than gasoline alone. So not only is this not as effective at lubricating the system, but it also means that the oil burns up in the chamber. That means more wear, more deposits, and more harmful emissions. In general, 2-stroke engines don't last nearly as long as 4-strokes. The lack of a dedicated lubrication system means that the parts of a 2-stroke engine wear out. 2-stroke oil is expensive. You need about 4 ounces of it for every gallon of gas. You would burn about a gallon of oil every 1,000 miles if you used a 2-stroke engine in a car. 2-stroke engines also don't use fuel efficiently. You're probably not getting rid of 100% of the exhaust gases, and you're probably not taking in a perfect air-fuel mix. 2-strokes also produce a lot of pollution. Each time a new charge of air and fuel is loaded into the combustion chamber, some of that is probably sneaking out through the exhaust port. That's why a lot of leaf blowers and lawnmowers exhaust still smells like gas. Because of valve timing, you can change all of those things to perform optimally in a 4-stroke engine. And that lets 4-strokes be super efficient. These disadvantages mean that two-stroke engines are used really only in applications where the motor is not used all the time, and you need a great power-to-weight ratio. In terms of simplicity and the ease of fixing it, a two-stroke easily wins out. So, both engines have their place. I'll ride in my four-stroke engine-powered car to the beach, then get on my two-stroke powered jet ski while brandishing my two-stroke powered chainsaw. I'm coming for you, sharks!
Continuously variable transmission is an automatic transmission that varies ratio depending on vehicle speed, engine RPM, and load. Engines have an RPM range where they deliver the best power at the best efficiency. The goal of the CVT system is to allow the engine to operate at optimal power for varying vehicle driving conditions. A CVT system consists of three principal components: a primary clutch, a secondary clutch, and a belt. The primary clutch has two sheave faces: the stationary sheave, which is attached to the engine crankshaft, and the movable sheave, which moves in and out to engage the belt. An arrangement of fly weights pivots outward in response to centrifugal force. These weights press on the movable sheave and force it towards the stationary sheave. The sheaves pinch the belt, engaging the CVT, and transmit power to the secondary clutch. The secondary clutch is mounted to the input shaft of the transmission or transaxle. Like the primary clutch, it has a stationary and a movable sheave. Belt pinch force in the secondary clutch is generated by a compression spring and a torque sensing element called a cam or helix. The compression spring holds the secondary clutch closed at low ratio. The helix has 2 or 3 helical surfaces that are in contact with rollers or sliding buttons attached to the clutch shaft. As the throttle is depressed, the primary clutch closes and tightens the belt. This forces the secondary clutch sheaves to spread and shifts the CVT to a lower ratio. The vehicle accelerates. When the throttle is reduced, the belt pinch at the primary is reduced, and the secondary clutch compression spring forces the secondary sheaves closer together. The vehicle decelerates. When the vehicle is started or accelerated under load, the helix senses the increased torque and prevents the secondary clutch and the CVT from shifting to a higher ratio. Backshifting occurs when the helix senses increasing load. This produces more torque to the ground. Upshifting occurs when the load is lightened. These shifts occur automatically and instantly in response to vehicle load and available engine power. CVTs can be tuned to differing applications by the right choice of flyweight mass, spring strength, and helix angle. When properly designed and tuned, all of the components of a CVT system work together to transmit engine power to the ground at the optimal ratio.
A snowmobile's secondary drive system, which includes the chain case, sprockets, and chain, is an intermediate gear reduction drive system. In addition to transferring power from the CVT to the track drive axle, the secondary drive system also provides the necessary gear reduction between the CVT and the track. Without gear reduction here, once the CVT fully upshifts, the track would spin as fast as the engine RPM. This 1-to-1 ratio would be far too fast for the track and suspension components. Most new snowmobiles ship from the factory with reasonably high secondary gearing. In fact, most are slightly over-geared, meaning they are geared for a top speed of 5 to 10 miles per hour or 8 to 16 kilometers per hour beyond what the machine is expected to achieve with ideal gearing under perfect conditions. However, altering the chain case gear reduction ratio is sometimes required for specific applications. Occasionally, it may be necessary to slightly change the gear ratio on snowmobiles used for hauling heavy loads.
We can adjust those ratios using the high and low range of this transmission.
I don't know, I just woke up from a little nap. It's a little dark, but you guys silly? I'm still gonna send it.
Okay, let's go take a look at our machines now. Here are two Department sleds. Both are Polaris 500s. Both are wide track machines and both have studded tracks. That means it's a little bit easier to climb up icy surfaces, but it also makes steering a little bit more tough on trails. What also helps turn this snowmobile, we have our skis, and down the skis you might notice a little depression. This plastic runner helps, steer in soft snow, but underneath there you'll notice a piece of hardened steel. These are also called skags or carbides, and these are what actually bites into ice and snow and helps you turn on really slippery surfaces. The difference between the wide track and wide track LX is just the width of the track. The wide track LX is just a little bit wider. Okay, moving on to the cockpit. Top left there in the red is your emergency brake. You'll notice controls for heated grips and heated throttle. There's a high beam there as well. Just to the right is an auxiliary input for a heated visor. And over to the right hand side of the handlebars, you'll notice your kill switch and your throttle. And that's just called a thumb throttle. Down below, your ignition key, the fill for fuel, a choke, and a little 12-volt outlet. Just to the right of that is your recoil starter. Again, these do come with electric starts, but if they don't work for whatever reason, you have the recoil backup. And just above that is your transmission with a high and low range. Okay, so welcome under the hood. Here it is, and let's get oriented. Again, a bit of a high-level overview. We have airbox, carburetors, cylinder head, spark plugs, Y-pipe exhaust. Down here's a battery. On this other side is a chain case and our brake. Again, we see our shifter, there's a recoil starter, and there's our reservoir for two-stroke oil and coolant. Spare belts and transmission is on the other side. Again, you can identify this as a liquid-cooled machine. On the top here, there is no heat exchanger, there's no fins, and there's no fan for air cooling. So the way that this cooling system works is hot coolant is circulated underneath, and underneath our boards here are heat exchangers. So when snow is kicked up on them, that nice cool snow hits that warm coolant, goes through the heat exchanger, and cool coolant is sent back to the engine. Now on the other side is our clutch cover, spare belt, and underneath we'll find our primary and secondary. So basically how this whole guy runs is that engine runs, it spins a shaft that goes out to here. This is what spins the primary. Primary through the belt, this is the transmission, the CVT. That'll spin the secondary. Secondary goes out to the chain case. Chain case will turn, and then that'll turn the drivers on the inside, which pulls the track along. This little rotor right here attached directly to your chain case and your track, that's what'll slow it down. So if you apply your brake too hard, you'll actually lock up that rear track and you'll skid. One more maintenance item. Down here, this white piece of plastic, those are called your sliders or your high facts. There's wear marks on those, and I'll show you how to check them. Okay, zoomed in, it's a little bit easier to see. These are the wear bars on your sliders, and it's advised that you check these at different sections of the actual slider because it can vary, and make sure that you look on different sides. They can wear unevenly, and it's pretty common, but this is the only thing that keeps the metal parts of the track and the skid from coming into contact. These wheels that you see here are called bogies. Depending where they are, inside or outside of the skid, they're inner and outer bogies, and they spread out the pressure along the sliders. Snow actually keeps this cool and lubricates it as it slides along, and that's your only contact between the sled and the track. If you find yourself looking for gear, look no further than the rack at Hall 4. So nothing is actually going to beat getting out and riding these things and really learning about it. If you have sleds of your own, I'm sure you understand that too. Again, these are something that you're going to need to train on to be proficient with, and learning trails, using maps, and using some of the apps available like Avenza are really going to help us too. Hopefully this helps a little bit, and if you're doing a course soon, enjoy it. And yeah, any questions, email me. Thanks.